And so the president is lying. It's as simple as that. Okay? Kevin Johnson should pay back all the money he took, plus a fine. And they should never receive any more money to a State Home Foundation again. CCNY should pay the money back.
Right.
Gerald Walton should be reinstated. And incidentally, 3 more investigator generals have quit in the last 3 weeks.
Right.
So the same thing, they bring this thing, the information up. Oh, no, we can't touch that. In fact, the guy that quit at Amtrak, he had their general counsel is Dean Acherson's granddaughter, who was a former head of Secretary of State in the United States, and he belonged to all of those organizations I've mentioned. And it just so happens that her roommate at Wellesley was Hillary Clinton. And so, the further you dig into this, the rottener it gets.
Well, and to step up that a little bit, the Inspector General Reform Act of 2008, which Barack Obama co-sponsored, mandates that the Inspector General does not serve at the pleasure of the President, but that Congress must be consulted with the reasons for any firing being clearly defined in writing, and a 30-day notice is required, which means he broke the law. Now, I know that later on now he, in an afterthought, suddenly did these things, but too late. He had already done it. But he broke the law, and in my opinion, that's an impeachable offense. But here's the thing, folks. How do you impeach a president who isn't eligible to be president in the first place? Wouldn't impeaching him, in a sense, affirm that he was president legally?
Yeah, but I don't think that'll get anywhere. And the reason why is Washington and Wall Street and banking control our whole being, our whole country.
Right.
And law is what they say it is. They own the judges, they own Congress, they own everything in the country, and they think, and these are the facts. I research 18 hours a day. I'm on the radio and I write. This is all I do.
Right.
And I happen to be pretty good at it. And they think that all of the wealth that you have, if you have any, belongs to them. This is their mindset. And that's why they got all these databases, because sooner or later, they're going to want to put you all on a chip, and it'll be like a debit card. And all your income will go in there, and you'll live from that. You go to the market and you'll use your card. The problem is, if it's me, and I'm saying the things that I am about what's going on, which happen to be the truth, my card won't work.
Total control. Total control.
And so that's where we're headed. And it's the same thing with FEMA and Homeland Security, the federalization of law enforcement, the usage of troops from other countries in our own country if we have civil insurrection, which we're fast headed towards. All of these things fit together. I mean, these people have spent the last 100 years planning this episode out. This is nothing that happened overnight. The destruction of the American manufacturing capacity, our tool-making capacity, our electronics, all of this has been done deliberately because they decided in order to get world government, we have to take the United States, Canada, and Europe to its knees financially and economically. It's the only way that we're going to be able to force them to accept one world government. And that's exactly what they're up to now. And this is the explanation for it all, because these people didn't make a bunch of mistakes. These people are all brilliant. They're not dumb. They may be evil, but they're not dumb. This just didn't happen. If you go back and you read all of those articles and speeches for the last 50 years like I have, you will find out that I'm right spot on. Everything I'm telling you has been planned.
And, when it comes to knocking the American the North American nations to their knees economically. Because you got to think about it, folks. If the idea is a global economic entity, in order for it to work, all of the nations would have to be dependent upon that global economic entity, and a nation who is able to stand up on its own feet will not be dependent on such an entity. In fact, from my reading of history, I mean, isn't this kind of what was behind or one of the things that was behind the French Revolution? I mean, they were looking for a united European economic entity, and France was just too strong economically. They had to be brought down.
That's correct. And the poverty in France at that time was very bad. The wealthy were very wealthy, and there was everybody else. There was a small middle class. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who didn't know, Robespierre and Madame Lafarge and the Republicans were responsible for the beheading of 300,000 people. And let this be a warning to the people who are trying to drive us in that direction. We do have courts, and we can try them, and that we will.
And these people, French Revolution, it was all in the name of enlightenment, secular, humanistic enlightenment. That sound familiar when it comes to today's society, folks?
You know, this is not the first time they've tried this. If you go back in history, the best recorded history probably goes back to the Dark Ages, which ended in the year about 1000. And as we evolved into the 12th century, history got better. Although in some areas, like in Ireland and Italy, the history was kept together pretty well by ecclesiastics, and from 700 to 1000. In fact, there's a very good book on the subject called How the Irish Saved Civilization. It's a small book, and it's really good. It's wonderful. It's something you just didn't know. But anyway, these people bent upon controlling everybody, this power thing, they really got rolling as we know it in the 12th century. And in the 13th century, they took from the Crusaders the control of European and, to some extent, Central Middle East banking. And that's what started the real long power trip. And the royal houses of Europe have been involved in this for centuries. And every so often they make their move at total world government. And the first one instance where it's very famous historically is in 1348 with the fall of the Lombard system, where they tried to do this and it came unglued, and they all got thrown out of Venice. There was the Venetian bankers, and they were exiled. Then in the early 1600s, we had the Medici family, which was the Hanseatic League, and that collapsed as well. And then they got smart, and the bankers tied central banking into private banks. The Bank of England in late 1600s was formed as a private bank. And the U.S. Federal Reserve, the Act of 1913, is a replica of that. You control the banks, you control the people. And it's a license to steal.
License to steal. You know, Ed, I've heard so many people call it that, and now what we're watching as we, when we discussed, dropping our economy to its knees, now what we're watching, and they're doing it gladly in front of our faces, and we're doing nothing about it. We're watching the value of the dollar decline. Everybody, I'm sure, remembers when you were younger, and you've heard many times in your life, if there's too much of something, it devalues it. Well, that's the way money is, and that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, they are literally printing us into bankruptcy as a nation. And as I've heard you say before on in the past, declining dollar is no laughing matter.
Well, let me give you a short paragraph from today's issue of the International Forecaster.
Okay.
The Fed previously said they would monetize $300 billion in treasuries, $600 billion in agencies, which is Fannie and Freddie, and bonds like that, and $1.2 trillion in toxic waste. And that would be a total of $2.1 trillion. And toxic waste are bonds that contained mortgages. Now, monetization means that the Fed uses money that doesn't exist. They create it out of thin air. And they just were saying that they were going to go out and buy $2.1 trillion worth of bonds with money they didn't have. And they can do that under their charter. They now have increased those numbers by $850 billion to almost $3 trillion